As the Roman Empire struggled to hold its ground in the 4th and 5th centuries, its legions, once the backbone of the empire, naturally underwent profound changes. Their size was reduced, their equipment evolved, and their predominantly Roman identity was blurred. But despite these changes, many of you are no doubt still curious about the answers to the controversial questions: which were the last legions of Rome, and what happened to them? So in this video, we will try our best to answer these questions by presenting all the surprising and unexpected evidence we have found. During the chaos of the 5th century, many legions in the West vanished from the historical records without a trace. It is assumed that they were either destroyed or ceased to exist due to a lack of pay, supplies, or reinforcements. Such was the case of the mighty Undecimani, for example, the descendant legions of the 11th Claudia, whose story and death we covered in a previous episode. But the gradual disintegration of the Western Roman Empire didn't mark the end of its army right away, even in territories that had been long abandoned. In the province of Noricum, for example, which was abandoned by the Western Empire in the 450s, remnants of the frontier garrisons still held their old positions at several points in the region, until they were finally conquered by the Heruli and Rugi decades later, in the 460s and 70s. These included the 1st Noricorum Legion, the 2nd Italica Legion, and the 9th cohort of Batavians. In fact, there's written evidence that the latter even tried to send a delegation to the western capital of Ravenna, asking for their salaries. But the most noteworthy example is the field army of Gaul under Aegidius, which had seceded from Rome after the assassination of Majorian in 460 AD, and endured as the Kingdom of Soissons after the fall of Western Rome in 476. But it too was finally conquered by the Franks in 486. Nevertheless, even this was not the end of the Roman military's legacy in northern Gaul. Writing almost 70 years later, during the reign of Justinian I, Procopius describes a very peculiar contingent within the Frankish army, for even at the present day they are clearly recognized as belonging to the legions to which they were assigned when they served in ancient times, and they always carry their own standards when they enter battle, and always follow the customs of their fathers, and they preserve the dress of the Romans in every particular, even as regards their shoes. These were no doubt the remnants of the field army of Gaul. After defeating them, the Franks probably recognized their effectiveness and hired them as mercenaries, even allowing them to retain their honor by carrying their own standards, which they apparently passed down to their children and grandchildren to continue their Roman legacy. So even 2 generations after the fall of Western Rome, these men still felt deeply attached to the history and traditions of their old units and ancestors. In the meantime, some Roman legions continued a more stable existence in the eastern half of the empire, serving as limitanae, or frontier units. But they would be rebranded and readapted during the military reforms carried out by Zeno and Anastasius, which introduced the new meros system, transforming the army into an early Byzantine one. By the reign of Justinian I, the word legio would finally stop being used. Parallel to this process, Procopius falsely complains that Justinian purposefully let the limitani, including remnants of the old legions, die out due to mismanagement and lack of interest. Thereafter, the frontiers of the Roman Empire remained destitute of guards, and the soldiers suddenly found themselves obliged to look to the hands of those accustomed to works of piety. However, despite Procopius's accusations, these frontier units seem to have been properly reinforced and maintained by the state, despite the term legion being officially abolished among the limitani too. Of course, this didn't mean that former legions didn't retain their history and traditions, only that it became almost impossible to keep track of them from this point onwards, due to the lack of primary sources. But very rarely, though, a brief mention of a familiar legion might appear within the sources, allowing us to briefly track them. Such is the example of the first Flavia Theodosiana legion, We can tell by its name that it descended from a legion raised by Theodosius in the 4th century. Remarkably, we can even tell it was among the troops Belisarius took with him for his invasion and conquest of Italy in 535 AD, and that it later stayed there for at least another 70 years. We know this thanks to a letter of Pope Gregory the Great, which records a unit called Theodosiani being among the defenders of Rome fighting against the Longobard invaders. Other descendants of the legions are also attested well into the 6th century. One soldier mentioned in the sources belonged to a unit descending from the 4th Parthica, a legion raised by Diocletian in the 280s AD. In time, it was renamed to Koiartoparthon, and is recorded to have fought at the Byzantine victory at Solachion in 586, where the soldier was seriously wounded. Historian Theophylact Simocata records the man as in the throes of death, his body adorned by 4 wounds. A median arrow had penetrated deeply through his helmet and planted itself in his upper lip. Another had in turn entered his other lip from below and was extended in antithesis, as it were, so that by means of opposing shafts his tongue was marked with a cross by the counterposed conjunction of the barbs, and hence the hero was unable to shut his 2 lips. On his left arm he also bore a spear's incursion, and a further wound in the side from a median javelin. This indeed was the epitaph even for his bravery. The man was quickly taken to the camp's hospital, where doctors removed all the projectiles from his body except the javelin in his side, which they believed would lead to much pain and his eventual death. Getting wind of the conversation, the soldier commanded the doctors to remove the javelin, for the news of the Roman victory was enough to relieve his pain, and that now he only awaited death. As the doctors predicted, the soldier did not survive the extraction process and passed away soon after. Eyewitnesses recount that they could feel his soul eagerly departing for the Elysian fields. But the continuity of the 4th Parthica legion pales in comparison to the 5th Macedonica, the descendants of which survived until the Arab invasion in the 7th century AD and took part at the disastrous Battle of Yarmouk, which saw many Roman units destroyed without a trace. The Macedonica was among them. This legion is often believed to have been the last, and its birth under Pompey before the campaign of Pharsalus in 46 BC gives it an impressive continuity of around 685 years. But even this legion was not the last recorded, nor the longest serving. That title rightfully belongs to a legion known to us through Christian tradition, which records the martyrdom of 60 soldiers from the units of the Voluntarii and Scidi, who were captured at Gaza during the Arab conquest of the city in 639 AD. After a first failed attempt to convert them to Islam, their captors made them march to Eleutheropolis, where an executioner was given the following instructions. Go to them in prison and tell them to deny their faith, and if they agreed to deny Christ, take off their shackles and release them with great honor. But if they did not want to consent, decapitate the first of them along with 9 others in front of the others, so that the others seeing this, led by fear, might deny their faith. We are told not a single one of them took the offer, and the first 10 were swiftly executed in front of the others. Among the victims were Imerius, Calidicus, Illustius, Theodorus, and Stephanus, all soldiers from the Scidi. The same offer was then repeated at Jerusalem to the remaining 50 soldiers: convert or die. But despite seeing their comrades executed before their eyes, the soldiers refused. Not even the promise of freedom for their wives and children made them budge, and they were all swiftly executed. Later sources record the names of the executed Scythi. The story of the 60 martyrs of Gaza, as it is known in Christian tradition, has a little detail that has been overlooked by generations of previous historians, that being the unit to which some of the soldiers belonged, the Scythi. This is none other than the remnant of the old late Republican 4th Scythica Legion, which still had the Capricorn as its sign, and the golden bull as its emblem, and had been part of the garrison of Syria for centuries. As the Roman army was divided up during the reforms of Diocletian and Constantine, part of the legion stayed behind as a Limitani legion, with its headquarters at Oressa. But during the tumultuous decades of the early 7th century, the legion was dispatched as part of the reinforcements sent to deal with the increasing Arab threat in Palestine. It fought during the Roman defeats at Dathan and Agnadine in 634, where it sustained heavy losses before retreating to the safety of Gaza, where the aforementioned 60 soldiers were captured, and then to Caesarea Maritima, where together with other units it defended the city before its final surrender in 641, after a 7-year-long siege. The 4th Scythica Legion, raised by Marc Antony in 44 BC, is a strong contender for the titles of both the last and the longest-serving legion of the Roman Empire. It was established 2 years before the 5th Macedonica and remained active until 641, just 3 years after the last recorded mention of the Macedonica. By that time, however, it's likely that only the name and symbols of these legions would have been recognizable to their republican creators. Hopefully, this paints a picture of just how long some units served. A very impressive feat given the violence and instability of the ancient world. For hundreds of years, Roman legions were born, fought, and died, all in the name of Rome. But like the Roman Empire they served, their end was inevitable. As history moved on, new units emerged which were better suited to the environments of a changing world. But as you can see, this didn't mean the legions simply faded from history. On the contrary, their legendary victories in the distant past left a lasting legacy, inspiring many to cling to their traditions and fight tooth and nail to preserve them, even to the death. Thank you so much for watching. We have other interesting videos about the Roman legions, so make sure to check them out. A special thanks to our kind Patreon supporters who made this video possible for your enjoyment. Consider joining them through the link in the description. As always, I hope to see you in the next one.